The lights were already too bright, the kind that make your heart beat louder than your thoughts. Backstage at America's Got Talent, the air felt heavy, like everyone was holding their breath at the same time. Contestants whispered prayers, stretched shaking hands, or stared at the floor, imagining either glory or humiliation. And then there was him, standing quietly in the corner, clutching a worn microphone, eyes fixed on the stage entrance. No one paid much attention. No dramatic outfit, no loud confidence. Just a deep breath, a small nod to himself, and a story no one in that room could see yet. In that moment, not even Simon Cowell had any idea that what was about to happen would completely flip the room upside down. When his name was called, the walk to the stage felt endless. Each step echoed with doubt. The judges smiled politely, the audience clapped out of habit, and Simon leaned back in his chair with that familiar expression, curious, but guarded. "Tell us your name," Simon asked, pen ready, already half expecting another forgettable audition. The contestant's voice trembled slightly as he spoke, sharing just a small piece of his life. He talked about failure, about being told again and again that his dream was unrealistic, about working long hours just to survive while holding on to music like a lifeline. It wasn't a dramatic sob story, just honest, raw truth. Simon nodded, still unsure. "All right," he said. "Let's hear it." The first note changed everything. It wasn't just good. It wasn't just surprising. It was the kind of sound that reaches somewhere deep inside you before your brain can even process it. The audience went silent, that rare, electric silence where you can hear people stop breathing. The singer's voice carried pain, hope, and strength all at once. Each lyric felt lived in, like it had been carved out of real experiences, nights of loneliness, moments of giving up, and the stubborn courage to keep going anyway. The camera cut to the judges. Heidi's eyes widened. Howie leaned forward. Sophia covered her mouth. And Simon? Simon's confident smirk slowly faded into something else entirely, shock. As the song continued, the contestant seemed to grow taller, stronger, as if the stage that once terrified him had become the one place he truly belonged. The crowd began to react, soft gasps turning into cheers between verses. People looked at each other as if to say, "Are you hearing this?" Somewhere in the audience, someone wiped away tears. This wasn't just an audition anymore. It was a moment, one of those moments people remember years later and say, "I watched that live." By the final note, the room exploded. The audience jumped to their feet in a standing ovation that felt endless. Applause thundered from every corner. The contestant stood there, stunned, eyes glossy, hands shaking, trying to understand what had just happened. He hadn't even finished processing his own performance when Simon stood up. That alone sent another wave of screams through the theater. Simon Cowell didn't stand often. And when he did, it meant something extraordinary had occurred. Simon walked closer, eyes locked on the contestant. "I did not expect that," he said honestly. "Not even a little." The crowd laughed and cheered, but Simon's tone shifted, becoming serious. He talked about how auditions like this were the reason the show existed, how true talent sometimes hides behind fear and self-doubt, and how moments like this remind everyone, judges and viewers alike, that dreams don't belong only to the confident or the lucky. They belong to the persistent. The contestant tried to speak, but emotion took over. Tears finally fell, not from sadness, but from release. Years of being overlooked, doubted, and underestimated came crashing out all at once. The judges' votes were obvious. For yes. But somehow, it felt bigger than that. It felt like permission to believe, to hope, to keep going. As the contestant walked off stage, the cameras followed him backstage where he collapsed into a chair, laughing and crying at the same time. Other contestants hugged him, some smiling, some quietly wondering if they'd just witnessed the audition that would define the season. Back on stage, Simon shook his head, still amazed. "That's why we never judge too quickly," he said. "That's why we watch." And this is where the story becomes more than just a performance. Because somewhere out there, someone watching this video feels exactly like that contestant did before stepping on stage. Tired. Doubtful. Invisible. Maybe you've been told your dream is too big, too late, or just not meant for you. But moments like this remind us that one opportunity, one brave step forward, can change everything. If this story moved you, if it gave you even a spark of hope, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us bring more inspiring stories like this to you, and it helps this message reach someone who might need it today. The journey didn't end with that audition. It was only the beginning. There would be tougher rounds, higher pressure, louder critics, and new fears to face. But something had shifted forever. The contestant no longer walked alone with doubt. He walked with proof that his voice mattered, that his struggle had meaning, and that sometimes, the people who shock the world the most are the ones who were never expected to shine at all. In the end, this wasn't just about Simon Cowell being surprised. It was about the reminder that life still has the power to surprise us too. That hidden inside ordinary people are extraordinary stories waiting for the right moment. And maybe, just maybe, your moment is closer than you think. The doors behind the stage closed with a dull thud, shutting out the roar of the audience and leaving behind a strange, tense silence. The hallway smelled of cables, makeup, and nervous sweat. Somewhere in the distance, a producer's voice echoed, calling out names, reminding contestants that their lives might change in a matter of minutes. Cameras rolled constantly, capturing every breath, every shake of the hand, every silent prayer. And in the middle of all this chaos stood one man, staring at the floor as if it held the answers to every question he'd ever asked himself. In a few moments, he would walk onto one of the biggest stages in the world. In a few moments, Simon Cowell would hear his voice. And in a few moments, everything he thought he knew about his future would either crumble or explode into something unbelievable. He wasn't supposed to be here. At least, that's what he'd been told his entire life. Teachers had said music was a nice hobby, not a career. Friends had smiled politely but never truly believed. Family members worried, not because they didn't love him, but because they'd seen the world chew up dreamers and spit them out broken. So he learned to survive. He worked jobs that drained his energy and his soul. He sang quietly at night, sometimes into a pillow so no one would hear, sometimes into the darkness, pretending that darkness was an audience that cared. Music was his secret weapon against despair, the one place where pain made sense and hope felt real. Backstage at America's Got Talent, all those memories pressed down on him at once. The failures. The rejection emails. The empty rooms. The nights he almost quit. His hands trembled, not from fear of the judges, but from the weight of carrying a dream for so long with no guarantee it would ever be seen. Around him, contestants rehearsed last-minute dance steps or vocal runs. Some laughed loudly to hide their nerves. Others sat frozen, lost in their thoughts. He stayed quiet. He'd learned long ago that his strength came from listening, from feeling, from waiting for the right moment to let everything out. When the producer finally called his name, his heart jumped so hard it felt painful. This was it. No more waiting. No more imagining. The short walk to the stage felt unreal, like time had slowed down just to test his courage. The bright lights hit his eyes immediately, blinding and overwhelming. The audience was massive, thousands of faces merging into one powerful presence. The judges sat at their table, icons of the industry, people whose opinions could change lives with a single word. Simon Cowell leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, expression calm but unreadable. He had seen thousands of auditions. He had heard every promise, every excuse, every overconfident claim of greatness. He did not expect surprises anymore. The contestant introduced himself, voice steady but soft. He spoke honestly, without drama. He talked about growing up feeling invisible, about using music as a way to survive when life felt too heavy. He didn't beg for sympathy. He didn't boast. He simply told the truth. Simon listened, nodding slightly, already trying to guess where this was going. "Okay," Simon said finally. "Whenever you're ready." The first note floated into the theater, and something shifted instantly. It wasn't just a sound, it was a feeling. A deep, aching feeling that wrapped itself around every person in the room. The contestant's voice carried a kind of honesty that couldn't be taught or rehearsed. It was the sound of someone who had lived the lyrics, who had bled through the melody, who had waited years for this one chance to be heard. The audience grew silent, as if any noise might break the spell. Even Simon leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing, not in criticism, but in disbelief. As the song unfolded, it told a story of struggle and resilience. Of falling down and standing back up when no one was watching. Of loving a dream even when it hurts. The contestant closed his eyes, pouring every regret, every hope, every unanswered prayer into his voice. His hands stopped shaking. His fear melted away. For the first time in his life, he wasn't singing to be accepted. He was singing because it was who he was. The judges' reactions changed second by second. Heidi's lips parted in surprise. Sophia whispered "Oh my God" under her breath. Howie's playful demeanor vanished, replaced by pure focus. And Simon's face told a story of its own. The skepticism faded. The expectations shattered. What remained was something rare, genuine amazement. He hadn't just underestimated this contestant. He hadn't expected this at all. Midway through the performance, the audience began to respond. Soft murmurs turned into applause between lines. People nodded along, some with tears in their eyes. The energy in the room grew heavier, more emotional, like everyone was sharing the same memory, the same pain, the same hope. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was connection. By the final chorus, the contestant's voice soared. It was powerful, controlled, and deeply emotional all at once. When the last note rang out, there was a split second of stunned silence, the kind that happens when people need a moment to process what they've just experienced. Then the theater erupted. Cheers exploded from every direction. People jumped to their feet, clapping, screaming, whistling. The contestant stood frozen, shock written across his face. He hadn't expected this. He had hoped, maybe, for approval. He had dreamed, maybe, of a yes. But this? This felt unreal. Simon Cowell stood up. The crowd went even wilder. Simon walked closer to the stage, shaking his head slowly. "I've heard a lot of auditions," he said, his voice calm but filled with emotion. "And I can honestly say, I did not expect that. Not for 1 second." The audience laughed and cheered, but Simon continued. "That wasn't just a good performance. That was a real performance. That was someone telling the truth." The contestant tried to respond, but his voice cracked. Tears filled his eyes. He covered his face for a moment, overwhelmed. Years of doubt came rushing out, replaced by something he hadn't felt in a long time: validation. Not just from the judges, but from himself. The votes came quickly. For yes. Unanimous. But it felt like more than a vote. It felt like a door opening. Backstage, the emotion finally spilled over. He sank into a chair, laughing and crying at the same time, hands over his face. Other contestants hugged him, some congratulating him, others inspired, some quietly intimidated. The cameras captured it all, the raw aftermath of a dream finally being seen. He called his family, voice shaking as he told them what had happened. On the other end of the line, there was silence, then sobs, then laughter. For the first time, they believed too. As the competition continued in the following weeks, the pressure intensified. Expectations rose. Critics appeared. Social media buzzed with opinions, both kind and cruel. The contestant faced new challenges: learning to perform under extreme pressure, dealing with sudden attention, fighting the old voices in his head that whispered he didn't belong. But something inside him had changed. He no longer relied on approval to sing. He sang because it was his truth. Each performance built on the last, revealing new layers of his story. He spoke openly about his struggles, not to gain sympathy, but to show others they weren't alone. Viewers connected deeply. Messages poured in from people who saw themselves in him, people who had almost given up, people who felt invisible, people who needed proof that it was okay to keep dreaming. And through it all, Simon watched with a different kind of respect. Not just for the voice, but for the journey. In interviews, Simon admitted that moments like this were the reason he stayed in the industry. "You think you've seen everything," he said. "And then someone like that walks in and reminds you why talent matters. If you're watching this right now, take a moment and think about your own story. Think about the dreams you've hidden, the fears that have stopped you, the times you've been told no. This audition wasn't just insane because of the talent. It was insane because it proved something powerful, that your moment can come when you least expect it. If this story touched you, inspired you, or made you believe a little more in yourself, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us share more real, life-changing stories like this with the world. In the end, it didn't matter how far the contestant went in the competition. What mattered was that he walked onto that stage and told the truth with his voice. He faced his fear. He surprised Simon Cowell. He reminded millions of people that sometimes, the greatest power lies in simply not giving up. Life will knock you down. Doubt will creep in. People will underestimate you. But somewhere, there is a stage waiting for you too, maybe not with bright lights and judges, but with an opportunity that can change everything.